Well, just like that, we're in the final week of the college football season. Despite there being only one game left in the regular season, we still don't know a lot of the conference championship matchups. There are a couple of games that have been decided or maybe have one team, but there are a lot of crazy scenarios that still need to be determined. So for those of you out there, myself included, who are really confused as to what needs to happen this weekend, here is your primer on what needs to happen for every conference championship scenario. Before we get to today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. Now we're actually going to start out with the conference where we know what the matchup is going to be. In the American Conference, we're going to have Army taking on Tulane. As of right now, both of those teams are undefeated and 7-0 in conference play. However, we still don't know where that game is going to take place. It's going to be whoever finishes higher in the college football playoff rankings. For Tulane, they closed their season against Memphis, whereas Army, they closed their season against UTSA. Now, based on Army losing this past weekend, if I were to guess, Tulane is going to be ranked higher, and if both of these teams win, Tulane is going to be hosting that game. But if both teams lose their next game, there's going to be a composite computer rating that is going to be used to determine which team will host the game. Moving on to the ACC, and we have half of the matchup as of right now. So far, SMU has clinched their berth in the ACC title game. As of right now, their opponent comes down to two teams. Clemson is 7-1 in conference play, where Miami is 6-1 in conference play. Clemson finishes the season playing South Carolina, a non-conference opponent, whereas Miami, they finish their season playing Syracuse, an ACC opponent. If Miami takes care of business against Syracuse this weekend, Miami will be in the ACC title game against SMU. But if Syracuse beats Miami, then Clemson would be the team that makes it to the ACC title game to take on SMU. Moving on to the Big Ten, and it's another game in which we have half the matchup. Oregon has already clinched their berth in the Big Ten title game. Now, this matchup is already kind of decided, but there is still a little craziness that could go down. If Ohio State wins this weekend against Michigan, they are in the Big Ten title game and will have a rematch of the great game that we got earlier in the season. But if Michigan somehow pulls off the upset and they knock off Ohio State, all of a sudden now, that opens the door for Penn State, and they have an opportunity to make it to the Big Ten title game. If Penn State beats Maryland this weekend with Ohio State losing, it would be the Nittany Lions that go to the Big Ten title game to take on Oregon. Now, there is also a really crazy scenario out there in which Ohio State and Penn State both lose. Now, if that somehow happens and Indiana beats Purdue this weekend, the Hoosiers would be the team that makes it to the Big Ten title game. Now, there is one more scenario out there in which Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana all lose. If that's the case, which first off, that would be absolute anarchy, but if that were to happen, Ohio State would be the team that gets to go to the Big Ten title game. So long story short, it's essentially going to be Ohio State unless there's absolute chaos. Now we go to the Big 12, where we have the most complicated matchup because as of right now, there hasn't been a team that's clinched their spot, and as of right now, there are 4 different teams that are still alive in the hunt. Currently, Arizona State, BYU, Colorado, and Iowa State are all 6-2 in conference play. Looking ahead to the schedule, Arizona State is on the road at Arizona, BYU is at home against Houston, Colorado is at home against Oklahoma State, and Iowa State is at home against Kansas State. All 4 of those teams are favored in their game. Now, to make things easy really quick, if all 4 of those teams win, the 2 teams that would make it to the Big 12 title game would be Arizona State and Iowa State. That's probably the easiest scenario out of all of this, at least trying to keep track of it. Now, if only 2 of the 4 teams win, obviously those 2 teams would be the teams that make it to the Big 12 title game. So for example, if Arizona State and BYU win with Colorado and Iowa State losing, your Big 12 title game would be Arizona State and BYU. However, things get really interesting if one of those 4 teams loses. If Arizona State, BYU, and Colorado win with Iowa State losing, the Big 12 title game would be Arizona State and BYU. If Arizona State loses and the other 3 teams win, the Big 12 title game would be Iowa State and BYU. The wildest 3-team tiebreaker would involve BYU being the lone team among the top 4 to suffer a loss. In that case, it would come down to the results of the other Big 12 games. Colorado would win tiebreakers in this scenario unless West Virginia beats Texas Tech. If the Cougars go down, Iowa State would only make it if Texas Tech, Baylor, and Cincinnati each win. Colorado probably has the most difficult path as they need to win, and they need both BYU and West Virginia to lose. Iowa State has the easiest path as they control their own destiny and they're guaranteed a spot in with a victory. Arizona State would clinch a spot with a win unless Houston, Colorado, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Baylor, and Cincinnati all win, which, if I were to guess, I don't think that's going to happen, but again, stranger things have happened. Now, I'm reading this right now from the Action Network, and this is actually insane to believe, but just listen to this. If you want to root for absolute chaos, there's actually the possibility of an 8-way tie for first place if each of the top 4 lose and both Baylor and TCU win, since an Iowa State would mean Kansas State finishes 6-2, as with the winner of Texas Tech and West Virginia. If that goes down, we would get Baylor and Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game. So yeah, as you can see, the Big 12 is a complete mess. We really don't know what's going to happen. There are so many different scenarios, but again, to make everything easier, if Arizona State and Iowa State both win this weekend, they're going to be playing in the Big 12 title game. But yeah, this is really complicated, and I feel like I'm losing brain cells trying to explain it and trying to figure it out. Going to the SEC, and this one is actually pretty straightforward and probably one of the easiest ones we've got. Georgia has already clinched a spot in the title game, and they will take on the winner of this weekend's Texas A&M game. So yeah, no other explanation needed, that's all we have. Moving on to Conference USA, and Jacksonville State has already clinched a spot, and they will host the title game. The other teams that are still involved include Liberty, Sam Houston, and Western Kentucky. For Liberty, theirs is the easiest as they clinch a spot with a win this weekend. For Sam Houston, they would need a win plus a Western Kentucky loss. For Western Kentucky, if they win and Liberty loses, they'll be in the Conference USA title game. Moving on to the MAC, which is a 4-team race as of right now. Ohio currently controls their own destiny. With a win over Ball State this weekend, they would take on the winner of Bowling Green versus Miami of Ohio. That's the likely scenario, but Buffalo is still alive as well. They would need to finish in a 3-way tie for second place with Miami of Ohio and Ohio, which would require a win plus losses by both Miami of Ohio and Ohio. But if Bowling Green loses to Miami of Ohio, they can still get there if Ball State is able to take down Ohio, where Miami of Ohio would need losses by both Ohio and Buffalo in the event of a loss. So again, if Ohio wins, they're in. And then you'd have the winner of Bowling Green versus Miami of Ohio, and that would be your MAC championship game. Moving on to the Mountain West, Boise State has already clinched a spot in the title game. They would have a rematch against UNLV if they take down Nevada this weekend. Colorado State is still alive in the hunt though, but they would need to win this weekend against Utah State and have UNLV lose. Now, if there's a crazy scenario in which both Colorado State and UNLV lose this weekend, UNLV would likely get the nod due to a computer rankings tiebreaker. We're going to wrap things up with the Sun Belt, where we still don't know the 2 opponents in the game. We'll start in the East Division, which is a 2-team race between Marshall and Georgia Southern. For Marshall, it's pretty easy for them. They clinch a spot with a win over James Madison or a loss by Georgia Southern. Meanwhile, for Georgia Southern, they clinch with a win and a Marshall loss. In the West Division, Louisiana holds a 1-game lead over both Arkansas State and South Alabama. So for Louisiana, they clinch with a win on Saturday against Louisiana Monroe, or if they lose, they just need a South Alabama loss to Texas State. Meanwhile, for South Alabama, they own the head-to-head tiebreaker over Louisiana, so they would clinch with a win plus a Louisiana loss. If there's a 3-way tie at the top, South Alabama would win the West due to the division record tiebreaker, since all 3 teams would have 1-1 records against each other. So there's still a lot of chaos that can go down for the Sun Belt title game. Well, those are all the conference championship game scenarios that we got this weekend. Like I said earlier, a couple of games we already know what the matchups are going to be, but for a couple of other games, there's still a lot of football that needs to be played to give us those matchups. So what conference are you going to be following the most this weekend and trying to figure out who's going to be playing in the conference championship? For me personally, it's definitely going to be the Big 12 because my Arizona State Sun Devils are still alive, and with a win, they're all but certainly going to get in. Not to mention though, there are so many crazy scenarios, so it's going to be really fun to follow that. Whatever conference you're looking forward to the most, and whatever game you're looking forward to the most, let me know in the comment section down below. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. I'm posting college football videos all season long, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, don't forget to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm, and it helps share this video and my channel with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.